J-Mac, that would be John McMullen and Jody McDonald. We're hanging with you on a Walkthrough Wednesday here on Birds 365, and we've got a friend to join us and add a third voice to our mix. You should be checking out his stuff on Football Outsiders. Always good whenever we get a chance to catch up with Mike Tanier. Mike, Jody Mac, and John McMullen here. How you been? How was your Thanksgiving? I haven't talked since before Thanksgiving.
My Thanksgiving, my Columbus Day, my Labor Day. We're all amazing. You guys got to pick up the phone more. We haven't talked in a while. But
I think we talked to Mike. I could be wrong. I have to look at the calendar. But we've talked to you since the season began. No, not Thanksgiving. No. I would say before.
Or maybe before after Columbus Day. That's
I think so. I think so. But I'm not up on the latest gossip. Who is disrespecting?
Micah Parsons was on Von Miller's podcast, and basically spent a good minute and a half talking about how good the Eagles are. I guess the discussion was Jalen Hurts for MVP,
right?
Which I think he should be the MVP. Doesn't necessarily mean he's the best player. I mean, I still think Patrick Mahomes, if everything was a vacuum and they had the exact same supporting cast, I think Patrick Mahomes is a better player, but that's not what MVP is about. Jalen Hurts has been tremendous. He basically said how good he was, but he talked up A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and the offensive line and his buddy Miles Sanders.
Right.
And just said they have a great, great team. And somehow a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people frame this as the most disrespectful thing in the world, Mike Tanier.
Sounds like we might be squeezing a little bit too much out of Micah Parsons' comments. Like you said, Penn State guy wants to, pump up the Penn State guys. Probably thinks in terms of the offensive line who he's got to match up against. Probably in his mind, he's got Mulata, he's got Lane Johnson in his mind, not the quarterback, and that's where that comes from. But the MVP debate is interesting. I'll just take one side element of it, independent of my feelings. Right now you can get Patrick Mahomes at plus 200. You take Patrick Mahomes at plus 200.
Yeah. I mean, he's the best player. He's the best quarterback. I shouldn't say the best quarterback in football if everything is in a vacuum. But here's the thing about Jalen Hurts, Mike, and this is the impressive thing about Jalen Hurts. If you gave me every quarterback at the beginning of the season and put everybody in that same vacuum, where would he be on the list? Probably, I don't know. But we talked about it, Jody. Probably 16 somewhere. We were talking, can he be top half? Could he be top 10? Oh, he's top 10. That list got a lot smaller for me. And he deserves all the credit in the world for the improvement, for the work ethic, for the season he's having. But I mean, MVP to me is not just the best player. It's who's having the best season. And part of having the best season is having the best supporting cast. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a 12-1 football team. If they finish 16-1 and he's the quarterback, and I had a vote, which I don't, Rob Monty, so I'll yell at Rob. Give me a vote. I'd vote for Jalen Hurts.
And I think some will agree, and some will also take the opposite of that argument and say, well, Jalen Hurts has this incredible supporting cast.
Yeah.
So does Mahomes, but Mahomes demonstrates without Tyreek Hill, with revolving door at receiver, with a bad defense, he's still doing these things, and they will take that. And I'll tell you right now, the voters are kind of like voters in like politics. They come home to the candidate. So the candidate they trust, so that, like someone who's like, well, this is traditional. I won't feel foolish 3 years down the road for this vote. They think in terms of that, and that's going to work in Mahomes.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Right. I'll tell you one thing.
If it's accurate, it's sad. If that's the way a voter actually thinks,
but I think he's right. It might be sad, but I think Mike is right.
Perceived or judged 3 years from now, screw it. Take that vote away from them. You can't be smart enough to be in the minute and say, no, the best player in the NFL this season, game's over and done with, crunch the numbers, look at what happened, and vote for the right guy.
A couple of years ago, they did that, I think, with Lamar Jackson. Like, they threw all priors aside, looked at Lamar Jackson's season, he won MVP. But, like, last year with Aaron Rodgers, I think that was an example of looking around at all of this, going for this sort of an average Aaron Rodgers year, a year where he was being controversial, et cetera, and be like, well, Mahomes didn't do this. Whoever else was in there last year didn't do this. Let's just vote for Rodgers. And I think that's part of the mentality. I think it's subconscious to a degree. It's not like, well, I'm just a traditionalist, I'm going to vote for the same guy year after year. It's more like looking at the entire field and trying to weigh these things. That's one of the factors.
Yeah. You know, if we talk about this team, because one of the other narratives, Micah Parsons is the big one this morning, but a lot of people, and we'll continue on the disrespect theme, not a lot, but there's many people, you know, everybody and their mother's got a power rating, Mike. What do the analytics say about who the best team is in pro football right now? Because, hey, there was, you know, ESPN's Football Power Index, if you like that one, at Dallas #1. Is that correct, Jody? Am I right? Or are they just ahead of the Eagles?
No, the Eagles are #3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cowboys were tied for first with the Chiefs, I believe it was, or was it Bills? I forget which AFC team it was. And the Eagles were third, and then the other AFC team was fourth. Now, they're all very close, but the Cowboys were tied with an AFC team, and the Eagles were third most likely team to win the Super Bowl.
Interesting. Well, I'll give you DVOA from Football Outsiders, purely analytical. Nobody puts a thumb on the scale. Nobody says, well, this or that. Eagles #1 right now in DVOA. They're, by the way, second in offense.
By the way, for our audience that don't know, quick explanation on what DVOA is.
Every single play of the NFL season weighted in terms of the importance of the situation. So a 3rd and 10 play is worth more than a, you know, 1st and 20 play with the, you know, with a 30-point lead, et cetera. So everything is factored, weighted, and says how far above average is this team. Okay, so the Eagles are #1 in that respect. 2nd in offense, 7th in defense, 17th in special teams. That's probably no surprise.
That's pretty good. Most people have them worse than special teams.
It's trending up. That's for damn sure, because they weren't 17th best a couple of weeks ago.
No, it trended up in the last couple of weeks when Britton came in at punt returner and started getting some decent punt returns, and like the chaos on the coverage teams went away. So Eagles 1, by the way, Bills #2, Niners #3, Cowboys 4. And I'll tell you one thing about this. Last week, the Cowboys were #1, and the Cowboys were literally #1 last week because of that 4th quarter against the Colts. That 35-point, like I was in bed. It was like late in the 4th quarter, and they scored 33 points.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the Eagles in the 4th quarter against the Titans were like, Gardner Minshew, go finish this nonsense out, et cetera.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, you say, well, that's not fair. That's not like the Cowboys run the score up, so to speak, while the Eagles sit on it. Most of the time across a season, the really good teams have quarters like that. Like all great teams put the backup in sometimes or just roll away sometimes. It was evening out. So it's close, but this week, obviously, the Eagles taking care of business. The Cowboys goofball game against the Texans, and the Eagles have moved into #1.
Yeah. Yeah. I always think I think it's Todd Rundgren, the I Don't Want to Work song. That's the Eagles right now. The starters, they don't want to work. So they did it again versus the Giants. So, yeah, I mean, they've been playing at this high level. And by the way, I think the Cowboys are a really good team. Yes. I think they're certainly they're certainly one of the best 5 teams in football. Right. I want to talk about the 2 teams that I thought were frauds from day one, and that was the Giants with Brian Daboll, who I think has done a tremendous job with that team, and then Minnesota with that awful pass defense. I don't know what the hell Ed Donahue trying to watch the Vikings and watch the Eagles because they run the same scheme, and you see the difference between the communication on the back end for one team and another team. But those teams are potential playoff teams in the NFC. Boy, the NFC it's better than I thought it was going to be, Mike, than we probably talked in the offseason. But it's really top-heavy to me with Dallas, San Francisco Eagles.
Right, a team with a 7th-round rookie at quarterback right now is by far the 3rd best team.
Yeah.
Like with not really any competition to the contrary of that. And that's exactly what it is. And you talk about frauds. I hate to use the term fraud.
Yeah, it's probably harsh, but
especially for the Giants.
Yeah.
Like the Vikings are out there and they're dancing around after these victories, and it's like you look like you're going to collapse at any time, and you think you're a Super Bowl team. The Giants are out there, hey, it's house money. We gotta come back. We're not in last place. It's really good for them. But the Giants, when they had their original roster for the season was not good at all, but Daboll could coach it up. When the backups came in for injuries, that was it. Like, there's nothing else that like Brian Daboll or his staff or anybody could do with these guys who are coming in who are backups to the bad starters. And you saw that last week. I mean, there were like maybe 5 or 6 guys who belonged on the same field as the Eagles for most of that game. And for the rest of it, it was just a matter of who's going to be a mismatch in that secondary. What's going to happen when the Eagles have a 2-score lead, and you can't be like, oh, we'll run options with Saquon and Daniel Jones, and that's how we'll stay in the game. And you kind of saw the result there.
All right. As Bill Parcells famously said, you are what your record says you are. And the Eagles are 12-1. But I think we can all agree that you can be a certain record, but trending one way or trending the other. Detroit Lions going to make the playoffs? And if they do, is that a team you want no part of come postseason?
You know, it's funny because there's always that this is the team no one wants to face in the playoffs, you know, the sleeper team. And your first inclination would be like, I don't want to face Tom Brady in the playoffs. That would be your first inclination. And then you look at how that Buccaneers team plays week in and week out. It's like, you know what? Give me Tom Brady. Give me Tom Brady because I think we can take a 25-point lead on him in the fourth quarter and he won't be able to come back from that. The Lions are interesting. Right now, Football Outsiders playoff odds, they have a 20.7% chance. They have a 20% chance of making the playoffs. Okay. They probably dug themselves too deep a hole. If they get there, that defense is still pretty weak. I feel like a team like the Eagles will get there on that defense. I think a team like the Cowboys will get enough sacks and pressure on Goff to get mistakes, etc. But in terms of what they're building overall, I believe in the Lions for 2023. I believe in the Lions as a structure of the franchise and the Dan Campbell regime. I'm writing about that, by the way, for the New York Times today. But for this year, I feel like they're fun. I think they're going to come up just short. It's going to be either the goofy Commanders or the goofy Giants, depending on Sunday night.
Yeah,
the third wild card spot.
I'm betting on the fighting Taylor Heineke's in that game. I think the Commanders are better than the Giants, but we'll see how that shakes out. One thing I'm concerned with, and Jody knows I was higher on Detroit than most people because, you know, when you pick that high in the draft so many years, all of a sudden you wake up and say, hey, we've got some pretty good players. Right. But, you know, I think they're going to lose Ben Johnson. He's one of those guys who, you know, young, innovative. I looked at that game last week, and it was a big win for him. And again, you're playing a team that's just the worst in the NFL against the pass, and Jared Goff is throwing the football all over the place. But they still had to use a fake punt with our old buddy Dave Bibb, and they still had to use Penei Sewell on a tackle eligible play, and he's tremendously athletic to convert a third down. And it was a great play call, but I mean, it's gimmicky. It's not something you can foundationally rest your foot on and beat a team like the Eagles or the Cowboys or the 49ers. So I do think there's still some steps that Detroit has to take, and I'm not sure Dan Campbell can take them. I'm not trying to help you with the New York Times, Mike, but I'm not sure he can take them without Ben Johnson. I think Ben Johnson is the key to that Lions team.
I think what's been exciting is that Johnson was sort of found as like the tight end coach on that team, was rapidly promoted to play caller when I think Campbell realized what he got. And besides all the goofy stuff with Dan Campbell, when he's got the coaches that he realizes can do the job, he gets them their opportunities. And the kind
That's
of
true.
Yeah, and the same thing kind of happens with the players. Yeah, a guy like Malcolm Rodriguez, like a 4th or 5th round pick, they isolate him right away. Oh my God, you're going to be our starter at linebacker. We're going to push other guys that we were paying aside to give you these opportunities and in response to them. So that's good process and that's good structure, and that's going to help them in the long run. But you're right. You know, Jared Goff's still the quarterback. He's still going to max you out in the middle of the pack. Receivers besides Amon-Ra St. Brown, they don't have a lot.
Jameson's coming, man.
That's
Jameson, yeah, he had a big touchdown in that game. So I think he's going to be a really good player.
So that's going to rise up. 2 first-round picks. One of them's the Rams pick next year.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of bodies they need to get on defense because they don't have a lot in the secondary right now. Aiden Hutchinson's like their best pass rusher. He's a rookie. He's hot and cold. Yeah. They need just more bodies, more talent on that team.
All right, Mike, who's going to be the hotter NFL head coaching candidate this offseason? Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson or Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen?
I think it's Steichen. I think people are going to look to him. little more experience, first of all, rising through the ranks, is doing this, has done this for 2 years with a team that's been a playoff team for 2 years that had no expectations last year, and also has demonstrated sort of a flexibility in the things he can do with a running quarterback. I'm looking at one example of a team that could be in the market for a head coach next year, the Arizona Cardinals, okay, who might want somebody to say, oh, we could work potentially with Kyler Murray, who's hurt, but they got to bring him back. Shane would be a possibility there. The Denver Broncos. We need somebody who can come in and put some things together that Russell Wilson will be comfortable with, happy with moving forward, that let him move around a little bit, but also create these other opportunities. That's a likely place for Steichen. I'm not going to say Ben Johnson isn't in the mix there. It might be a year away for him, or it might be a thing where he's on the tier right below the Eagles offensive coordinator, and he's the guy people go to when they can't get who they want.
You know, Nick gave Shane the baton, so to speak, for the Chargers game last year. The Eagles lost that game. I think it was 27-24, but they were in it. They played well. And then since that day, they've lost 3 games, 3 regular season games.
Wow.
They lost the Giants game, which we all talk about, Jalen Reagor and the drops. They played very poorly, but they still had a chance to win the game if Jalen Reagor catches the football. Then they lose to Dallas when they weren't playing anybody, getting ready for the playoffs. And then they had the 1 loss this year. That's Shane Steichen as a play caller. If people start to notice that, I don't know where, but he's going to get a head coaching job. So my question is, can the Eagles suffer the attrition of losing both coordinators? Because Jonathan Gannon got 3 interviews last year in the coaching hiring cycle.
I don't know. I don't have my finger on the pulse of who else is on the staff. We're rising up through the ranks. Okay. And unfortunately, that's just part of success in the NFL. As part of success of if you're the team with the first round bye, they get the interviews.
Oh, they get the interviews. You're right.
Interviews. So you almost want to be the wild card team, try hard, that works its way up. And by the time the interview process is done, like, oh, we've already hired guys, we don't want your guys. Like, that's how some of these teams have kept their coordinators along the way. So I don't know, but at some point you do have to trust structure again. And Nick Sirianni has shown, like, he does delegate. He does, put these guys in position. You hope that, kind of like in that Andy Reid method, the next people coming up are ready for the task that's going to be put in front of them.
All right, Mike, I'm going to apologize ahead of time before I ask this question, because it's probably going to lend you to an answer that someone's going to perceive that you are disrespecting someone. So I'm apologizing ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
3 very talented Pro Bowl level, all pro level wide receivers were traded this offseason.
Okay.
One was Tyreek Hill. One was Devonta Adams. One was A.J. Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Of the general managers that acquired those players, who made the best deal?
Howie. Howie has something in place that he knows he's doing a win more, next step type of maneuver. Doesn't pay through the nose. I mean, Tyreek Hill was cost a lot more draft picks. And with good reason, you understand why. And it's a very specific need for the Eagles. The Eagles needed a number 1 receiver that could work the middle, could work the short game more, so that you aren't putting guys in that position who couldn't really do that. So you get A.J. Brown, you get it for a manageable price of draft picks, you have a manageable price in terms of salary moving forward, and you get exactly what you paid for along the way. So the Raiders I wouldn't put in this discussion, because the Raiders thought they were like a playoff team or a Super Bowl team and spent that way, and they're goofing around at the bottom of the standings right now. And the Tyreek Hill thing is just very complicated. It's very complicated. It was a great acquisition, but you see what's kind of happening with the Dolphins right now.
Yeah, great player. I mean, Tyreek Hill, Devonta Adams, the problem with the Raiders isn't Devonta Adams; it's everything else they do around Devonta Adams. So it's not the vacuum. We talk about the vacuum all the time. What Howie's done well, he made the deal to get A.J. Brown, who's been tremendous. I think he's the sort of final piece to the puzzle on the offensive side, and everything else fell into place. But he's done so many other good things. I mean, defensively, Hassan Reddick and Kaiser White and James Bradbury and even decided Chauncey Gardner Johnson before he got hurt
Right.
Even deciding, you know what, Marcus Epps is a good player. We're going to make him a starter. Even in-house decisions. Defensively is what I want to talk. You mentioned number 7, and which, to be honest, I thought was a little bit low. I expected it to be a little bit higher. When you look at this Eagles defense, I have a tougher time figuring out. We all know Jalen Hurts, MVP candidate. I've been asking this all week of people. Who's the MVP of the Eagles defense?
Don't know. That's very tricky. You know, Reddick has been a big addition. Both Slay and Bradbury have played very hard. I don't know. I don't really have an answer for you along the way. I will tell you this. I just looked up team defense. You were asking. Eagles are 7th in Football Outsiders DVOA. 2nd against the pass to the Cowboys, whose, you know, pass defense is like a million sacks. So the Eagles now have more sacks. It feels like the Cowboys have more pressure. Eagles are 24th in run DVOA. Part of that was that midseason thing when, you know, Davis was hurt, Sue and Joseph weren't here yet. Fletcher was playing too many snaps, and it really showed along the way. But that's still like in the resume for the Eagles, and that's where they are. But in terms of the defensive MVP, I don't know. I would probably just default it to Slay. But Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was playing like, I think, at an MVP for the defense level for the Eagles.
Leading the league in interceptions. I mean, and and they picked him up on the eve of the regular season and threw him in there. And switched his position, by the way. Played nickel corner. Well, with the Saints.
That's just a great idea. I didn't mention Brandon Graham's been having a heck of a year.
Yeah.
You just kind of take him for granted. I take him for granted. That was a great example, Gardner-Johnson, of you've got this team, the New Orleans Saints, has mismanaged its cap in a million different ways. And they're not sure whether they're coming or going. Are we really a playoff team or are we a rebuilding team? We don't know. Jameis Winston is our quarterback, and et cetera. And you just grab him kind of like just, and Bradbury was the same way. Cap dump, give us a pick. We give you this guy. And you when you're alert to that kind of thing as a GM, it pays dividends. You get these guys, pennies on the dollar. It's not splashy. It doesn't make headlines, but it's such a value added for your defense that you create a season like what the Eagles are having.
All right, Mike, no disrespect to the Bears, because I think Eagles are going to beat them on Sunday. No disrespect to the Cowboys, because I think the Eagles are going to beat them on Christmas Eve. But if those two things come true, and the Eagles have everything locked up, guaranteed home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs, no home field advantage in the Super Bowl, because we all know we're going to Arizona. How do you think the Eagles will? How do you think they should handle those last 2 games of the regular season with really nothing to play for? They've kind of tipped their hand on how they believe you should handle players and protect them from injury and the like. But you're looking at 3 straight weeks of no games, 2 games and a bye week thrown in there. How do you think it'll shake out for the Birds if, and I know I'm granting them victories before they've ever played, and this is my favorite hypothetical, if they win the next 2, how will the Eagles handle the last 2 regular season games?
Well, I'm a believer in if it's 2 games of rest and a bye, you probably want a couple of series in one of those games for everybody. Okay, a little bit to keep everybody from falling completely off the rails. And the other side of that is, like, guys over 30 probably don't need that. So it's a push-pull. And what I would say is if Kelsey and Lane Johnson are not playing, quarterback should not be playing. Okay? And then you have to look at and ask the question, what will Kelsey and Lane Johnson need at the end of the season? They will probably need rest. That's probably in their best interest to get some rest along there. And you play it according to that. So that's my mentality. The idea, you want to protect Jalen Hurts. You want to protect A.J. Brown. Your number one thing is you want a healthy and rested offensive line for the playoffs. What does the offensive line do? Obviously, Lane Johnson's got an injury right now. He could be playing hurt in the next couple of weeks. If he's like, man, I need to sit out, boom. That's your priority. Rest those guys and say, Gardner Minshew, you're going out there with the backups. It's not about rust right now. It's about health. That's the variable you can control.
All right, Mike, it's a weekly tradition on Birds 365, so I'm going to bring you in on it. It seems to happen at least every week, and that's Players of the Week. And every week it seems the Eagles have a Player of the Week, and that is the case today, and it's somebody you just mentioned, The defensive player of the week in the NFC is Brandon Graham. Good. I just wanted to announce that for the fans, but we do it every week, it seems, here on Birds 365 because it comes out Wednesday morning. I do want to talk about who the Eagles are going to be playing in Glendale. So let's go an optimistic route and talk about the AFC side and the Super Bowl. Now, it might come down to who's going to be the number 1 seed. It toggles between Kansas City and Buffalo. But if there is going to be another team, if there's going to be a surprise team, Cincinnati again?
Yes. The non-surprise surprise team. The most surprising team to have almost won the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, exactly.
And to be 8-4 and have a great young quarterback and one of the best receiving corps in the NFL, et cetera. That would be it. They're playing probably better football than the Bills and the Chiefs right now. Certainly the Bills, who are a little bit wobbly, especially after the Von Miller injury, some of the other injuries they've had, they're like at 3/4 strength. And the Bengals kind of got all their injuries out of the way in the first half of the season. So, I haven't looked at the odds right now, but it's a 3-team race between those. And I would put the Bengals right up there with them. DJ Reader, who is a phenomenal defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Came back from injury a couple weeks ago. Like, we lost track of the fact that he was hurt because Jamar Chase was hurt, and that's the headline. Reader comes back, and he's stopping the run, like, almost single-handedly with the help of some of their young linebackers against these opponents like the Browns who want to run the ball against them. That's a difference maker. The fact that they've figured out their offense, that their offensive line is playing well now after, like, stinking it up for the first 2 or 3 games, that Joe Burrow has discovered you can check down sometimes. That's okay. It's okay to check down when Jamar Chase and everybody has got the defense playing 30 yards on his heels. That's a positive sign. We know what the Chiefs and Bills are. I think the Bengals are right in the tier with them.
And I noticed that last weekend, 2 weeks running now, the Bengals shut down King Henry 1 week and then Nick Chubb the second week.
Right.
Everybody always immediately defaults to Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase when they talk about the Bengals.
Yeah.
Their run defense is the reason that they're right there with Kansas City and Buffalo. They played great run defense the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
All right. I don't think we've mentioned this guy's name yet. Brock Purdy. We talked a little at the top about how you rank the NFC teams, and San Francisco's in the mix, mostly because of their defense. But I watched both of his games the last 2 weeks. For a guy who was selected with the last pick in the draft to be able to come in as a rookie and come in and just guide the team. You're not even asking him to put the team on his back. Just don't mess it up. Kind of be Jimmy G. That's not an unreachable bar to be Jimmy G. And Purdy has done that for 2 weeks. Do we not give him credit for that? Do we not give Shanahan credit for having a guy that they took with the last pick in the draft and having him able to step in and keep the offense going the way it has?
I think Purdy deserved credit because he's been very athletic and alert in this bad situation and has risen up through the ranks. He kind of, beat Nate Sudfeld, for example, for that job.
Yeah, that's a tough one. They should have kept Nate Sudfeld.
The unstoppable Nate Sudfeld.
The unstoppable, the Prince of August, Nate Sudfeld. Shanahan gets all the credit in the world from me in terms of some of the things he does. I don't know. I know 49ers fans, the moment that team loses a game, once Shanahan shipped off the sea, and I don't understand.
That is amazing. That guy is so good.
Right.
So good.
And in terms of just a pure game planner, game scripter, there may be nobody better. In terms of, here are my guys, here are yours, here's the script, here's all the ways we're going to stress your defense and get the ball to these playmakers. There's no one better. And he's had a phenomenal defense, and their defensive coordinators keep rising up, and he delegates that. I think they've done a tremendous job. I guess Vegas is giving them plenty of credit. Vegas has them neck and neck with the Cowboys, last I checked, behind the Eagles to win the NFC. They don't care that it's Brock Purdy. So at the end of the day, I can't necessarily care what, like, random fans or people who do power rankings think. Football Outsiders thinks this. We think this. Vegas thinks this. That's what it means.
But here's my 49ers additional point. Deebo Samuel's going to miss a couple weeks.
Yes.
They haven't come out and put a timetable on it, but what was the quote that John had yesterday? 3 games-ish or something like that. So he didn't want to say anything, but he wanted to give them a little something. So in other words, you're going to miss a couple of games. Should be back by the time the playoffs roll around. We thought this kind of a little bit about, both John and myself thought this about Dallas Goedert when he went down. What would be the domino effect? How are the Eagles going to replace him? He is a guy who seemed almost irreplaceable. And then the Eagles went out and put up 35 points and 40 points. So, oops, McMullen and McDonald wrong. They did just fine without Dallas Goedert.
Right.
You going to say the same thing about Deebo Samuel out of the 49er lineup for the next couple of weeks? Can they just look in another direction, formulate the very good head coaching system and plans? Can they just move on without Deebo Samuel? We know they're going to get him back. But what's that 49er offense going to look like the next couple of weeks without Deebo?
McCaffrey, Kittle, Juszczyk. Just in terms of guys who catch those little passes and move. Okay, just the guys.
Don't forget Brandon Ayuk too. You know,
and Brandon Ayuk is their more traditional receiver who's come around this year. The young man Gray, who is I think a 3rd or 4th round pick, gives them the one vertical shot per game that they take. And I think Purdy actually has a better arm than Garoppolo, so they can fool around with that stuff. I think there is enough there, especially now. I'm going to tell you right now, I am all in on the Seahawks tomorrow night. I am all in on the Seahawks at home. I think Purdy can do a lot of things. I think preparing a 7th round pick on 3 days rest for a road game, I think that's a tall order. So I am taking the Seahawks next week. But then all you have to do is look past that and say, Commanders are a win. Raiders are a win. Cardinals might have fired everybody by the time they get to them at week 18. So I think the sustainability of what they're doing without Deebo is fine, give or take the idea that I think they're more vulnerable on a game like Thursday nights.
At Mike Tanier, follow him on Twitter, read him at Football Outsiders. New York Times as well going to be writing about those Detroit Lions, correct? That's what you said. Dan Campbell making a late run toward the postseason. I'll end it. We'll revert back to the Eagles and say offensive player of the year. That's an interesting conversation for me because MVP has become a quarterback award. It's where you get the Tyreek Hills and Justin Jeffersons involved, players like that, offensive player of the year, because of the unique stats of Jalen Hurts. Maybe not that you were talking about the traditional thought process. First quarterback in history to have double-digit rushing touchdowns. Going to have this huge touchdown number. You think he could be in that equation, the offensive player of the year equation?
He could be. A couple of years ago, Mahomes was both MVP and offensive player of the year. And there were a couple of years in there where the second best quarterback got offensive player of the year. Very recently, the thinking, and again, we all talk to some of these voters, and there's like a collective thinking. It's turned into the best non-quarterback award, really, only in the last 3 or 4 years. And frankly, I would like it if they named it that. I think the Barry Sanders Offensive Player of the Year award would be a nice.
Don't get me started with that. The NBA just did that yesterday, naming awards after guys.
You don't like that?
Who'd they name? What they do? What they do, Jody? Who'd they name?
They attached former player names to all the awards. It's now the Wilt Chamberlain Rookie of the Year award. I don't even friggin' remember what Wilt was like as a rookie. He was big and he was dominant.
I know.
I can't tell you anything else. It was friggin' 60 years ago. What does an NBA fan today have anything to do with Wilt Chamberlain?
Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing because they teach him a little bit of history. But Michael Jordan. Tone says Michael Jordan MVP award. Who won the most MVPs? I don't even know. Was it Michael
Jordan? Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
I feel like MVP should be MVP and not tied to something.
I agree with you.
But by the way, I did not expect that to be the hottest pushback take of this segment. But I'll back off of that because I'm not married to it. I think that yes, Jalen Hurts could be in that conversation. Right now, I'm saying plus 250 for him. The problem you have right now is that both Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill have very, very strong candidacies. And two things are happening. The Dolphins will steer out of the skid, and Tyreek Hill will be a big cause of that. And people will remember that goofy fumble recovery and all these other plays, and that's it. Or the Vikings steer out of their skid, and even if they don't, the Vikings could fall down the down the stairs the rest of the season. And Jefferson's still going to get his. And it'll be an uphill battle for Jalen Hurts. And I don't like it, but Jalen Hurts is going to wind up with one of those other goofy categories like breakout star. the ones that have a sponsor. If you don't, and
the FedEx breakout star. I don't want to give the Ocean Casino Resort breakout star is Jalen.
Exactly.
That would be awesome.
And oh, by the way, Justin Jefferson should win whatever the hell you want to call the award, whoever it's named after, whatever else, for one reason only. He was smart enough not to guarantee a victory by the Vikings against the Lions.
Jalen Reagor, baby.
Oh, that dope Jalen Reagor did, but Justin Jefferson did not.
Wide receiver 4 guaranteeing wins. I like it. I like the ballsy nature of it.
I'm glad I'm here in the corner coffee shop where we can just espouse Jalen Reagor hate. And no one's like, what is your problem? He's a punt returner for like another team.
First of all, who's talking to Jalen Reagor during the week? He plays 6 snaps a game and he's guaranteeing wins. That's amazing to me.
Mike, good stuff. Always a pleasure. Let's see. So we got Christmas coming up. So we got you on before Christmas. So we're going to have to get Tanier on the week between Christmas and New Year's because we don't want to miss another holiday. So we got to get him in before New Year's. So write it down.
He's like, no.
You're on vacay? You're
going to try to take a couple days off in there. You know?
More power to you,
Mike. A little bit when she's off. So yeah.
Enjoy your holidays. We'll get you on when the playoffs get underway. We appreciate you coming on with us today. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, pleasure. Take care. Enjoy your weeks, guys.
That is Mike Tanier from footballoutsiders.com, who's A, knows what he's talking about, and B, adds a little personality whenever he comes on. That's why we like having Tanier on. All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald. When we come back, J-Mac, before we get our usual Wednesday spot with Mike Gill from down the shore up, I'm going to ask you an NFL draft question. Because there was some NFL draft buzz yesterday having to do with
it's not Todd McShay related, is it?
Oh yeah, it's Todd.
Man,
that I will use that as a springboard.
How long has Todd been doing this? That's all I'll say. That's my tease.
Not as long as Mel. Todd's been doing it a long time.
He's been doing it.
Mel's been doing it long
enough. He's been doing it long enough to know better. That's all I'll say.
I would tend to agree. But there's a couple of draft spinoff questions I want to run by you. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. You're listening to